Life happens, and not always the way we expect it to. Every single day we face change, stress, and uncertainty. What if you could learn to thrive no matter what life throws your way? Resilience expert Adam Markell and his inspiring guests explore breakthrough strategies to fully embrace change and build the resilience required to become change-proof.
Hey everybody, it's Adam Markell. Welcome to another episode of the Change Proof Podcast. Today I've got a great guest, somebody that you may have heard of. He is, in fact, world-renowned. So Dr. John Demartini is a polymath and a world-renowned human behavior expert. He has 5 decades of research across multiple disciplines. His work has been described by students as the most comprehensive body of work and an extensive library of wisdom, as well as wisdom of the highest and most valuable order. He's got a brand new book out, aptly named The Resilient Mind. So stay tuned, buckle up. We've got an amazing conversation that's just ahead. All right, John. So I know you. We actually talked about this right before we hit the record button, but we know each other through an organization that we're both affiliated with, but we've never met before. So this is our first meeting, which is exciting. I hope our folks will find it just as exciting as we do. But I know a bit about you, and you've got a really storied history. I can't imagine how many times you've been introduced, let's say, where your bio's been read, you're being introduced, and you hear that language of all the things you've accomplished, everything that you've done in the world. I know it's odd for me every time I hear that kind of thing. But my question for you, first out of the gate, is what is one thing that is not a part of that bio or that introduction that you hear repeatedly, even to this day, that you would love for people to know about you?
You know, I like to think about myself as just a man on a mission with a vision and a message that loves to blab, loves to speak, and help people transform their lives and do something extraordinary with them. I'm sure we have that in common. And that's not always worded that way on any bio, but
no,
I can't wait to I do 4 things. That's it: teach, research, write, and travel. The rest of it, I'm pretty well useless. Those are the only thing I'm doing pretty good. And I delegate everything except that. That's what I do. And everything is delegated. I even have a clock changer on my ship here.
I want to get to this. I want to get to a question that comes to mind when I heard what you just said, which is, when did you dial it in? So I want to put that on the side for just a second, because for business owners, for people who operate in that space, entrepreneurs for sure, to get that level of clarity. I mean, I'm sure folks just heard you say that and it dropped in for a lot of them going, wow, I just wish I was that clear. I wish I just knew that that's what I should be doing. And obviously not doing other things means delegating to people who maybe it's their core competency. Hopefully it is to do those things. But I want to put that aside for a second and ask you a different question, which is, when did you know that this was your thing? I'm going to share really quickly when I knew, but only later did I know that that's what was happening. When I was maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, something in that range, I remember with friends, other little kids around, that I would be giving sort of advice. It's so long ago, I kind of go back in my mind to try to really think about what it was that I was doing. But strange word I would use, but I was counseling. On some level, I was counseling in this little, a group of just, young kids. Maybe it's leaked into teenage years, et cetera. And then I became a teacher later on for a short while in middle school. And then I became a lawyer, and now doing what I'm doing. And the thread that ties all those really different things together is this concept of counseling, of being able to give people advice, if you will, or help them to figure shit out. So my question to you is, do you have an early life memory, or can you pinpoint when it was that everything you're doing now, actually all the seeds were sort of there?
I was a learned disabled child. I had a speech impediment. From 1.5 to 4, I was going to a speech pathologist. I had an arm and leg deformity, And I was told in first grade I would never be able to read or write, never be able to communicate effectively, probably wouldn't go very far in life, never amount to anything. And the only thing I was decent at is standing on a surfboard and throwing a baseball. And so sports was a way. Even the teacher said, put him into sports. He seems to be decent there. Because once I got out of my braces, I just wanted to run fast. And I wanted to show that I could stand up and be balanced, because I would fall over as a kid. So I left school when I was 13, became a street kid, wanted to go surfing. So I lived first from age 13 to about 14. I lived in Freeport, Texas, and Galveston, Texas, where the surf was. At 14, I hitchhiked out to California and down into Mexico. And at 15, I made my way over to the North Shore of Oahu. And I wanted to be a big wave rider. And I did. I got into some surf magazines, surf movies, and even a surf book from Big Waves. And then I nearly died at 17. And in the recovery of that, because I was unconscious for 3.5 days, in the recovery of that, I was led to a health food store and to a yoga class to try to gain mind over body. And at this yoga class, there was a guest speaker there one night. His name was Paul C. Bragg. You probably heard of Bragg's amino acids. And Paul Bragg spoke that night in such a way that inspired me to believe that maybe I could someday overcome my learning problems and learn how to read and speak properly and someday become intelligent. And the night that he spoke, it was the first night in my life I thought maybe, just maybe, I could someday become intelligent. And that night, he took us through a meditation. And in that meditation, I saw a vision. And I was standing out on a balcony. I remember walking through this stoned archway, coming out onto a balcony and standing before 1 million people and speaking about the power we have in healing. And that in the background, there was an iconic building from every major city around the world, because it was me wanting to share a message with the world. Anyway, I was speaking in Melbourne, Australia, 11, 12 years ago. And I was sharing that story in more depth. And a famous painter came up to me from the audience and said, I would really love to paint that. So I want to show you this. So this is the painting of that night.
Wow. Well, folks, you're going to literally have to just hop on YouTube because I can't do it justice. And I don't know if Dr. Demartini can do it justice either. He is standing on a balcony. He is looking out on what seems to be many thousands of people. And there are these iconic classic buildings in the background. By the way, the frame is gorgeous. So
He sent this to me as a gift. His name is Andrew Tischler. He's a famous painter in Melbourne, Australia. Wow. And he sent it to me as a gift. And that was the vision that I saw that night. The title of it is A Man on a Mission with a Vision and a Message, who wants to create, original ideas that serve humanity. That's the title. Mm. So I knew that night what I was dedicated to.
16, 17? What was it again?
I was 17.
17.
And now I'm going on 69 now. So I have done this for more than 50 years. I became a teacher at 18, and I started gathering students at 18 when I first started to learn how to read. And I've never stopped. And I've now spoken in 192 countries because of never stopping.
And you still maintain your Jackson Brown hair. I mean, how on earth? Seriously.
Yeah, I still got a little bit of hair left. It's starting to get gray. You can see the gray.
No, buddy, you can't say that in my presence. This guy, got a great head of hair. Yeah.
But I'm all I can say is that I can't think of anything else I'd rather do than teach, research, write, and travel.
Yeah.
All right. I learned. Can I share a story now of how that came about?
Please.
You asked that question.
Yeah, I was just going to come back to that. So you're making my job really easy.
I want to be a teacher, healer, and philosopher. A teacher, healer, and philosopher. So that was what I wanted to do. So I ended up going on to professional school to be a doc. And I opened up my practice in 1982 after about 10 years I had to go back and take a GED and go back and figure out how to pass school. And I failed at first, but I eventually overcame it by memorizing a dictionary. And, but I ended up eventually becoming scholarly. And, they said you'd never read. I've read over 30,729 books now as of today. And so I've devoured books since I learned how to read at 18. But at 27, I opened up my practice, 1982, October 12th. And about 3 or 4 weeks in, I was realizing, I'm doing everything. I'm doing payroll, which I had one assistant that I was paying, and I was doing bank reconciliations. I'm doing supplies. I'm doing patients. I'm doing this. I'm doing paperwork. I'm doing that. And I'm going, this isn't all that inspiring. This is not the way that I envisioned it to be. I went to 10 years of college to do this. And I love the healing art. I love speaking, but I didn't love all this administrative stuff. And I thought, I got to figure out how to do something about that. So I went to Walden's bookstore, which was a chain in those days. And I went and bought a book called The Time Trap by Alec McKinsey on time management. And I devoured that book. When I read a book, I devoured it. And I wrote a summary of that book and put a 6-column piece of paper. And I really like to share this if I could with everybody who may be listening, because it could make a difference in their business. What I did is I put 5 vertical lines on a piece of paper. So there's 6 equal columns. In the far left column at the top, it says daily actions. So if you put it at the very far top first column on the 6 columns across the page, daily actions. And I wrote down every single thing I do in a day, from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, factoring in over a 3-month period. Each day is slightly different, but I want everything that I would ever do in those 3 months on that piece of paper. And not broad, vague generalities and things, labels like marketing, too vague. What are the actual little action steps that I'm actually doing with my body on a moment-to-moment basis in marketing or sales or whatever I'm doing, administration? And I broke it down and I made this massive list. It was multiple pages long of everything I do from the time I wake up and not. And then I differentiated them into things that I do at home for family and the things I do for my profession. And as I did that, this whisper in my head was saying, you're majoring in minors and minoring in majors. You're doing a whole lot of stuff that's not really important. And no wonder you're burdened. Because if you're not filling your day with the highest priority actions that inspire you, your day is going to fill up with low priority distractions that don't. If you don't fill your day with high priority actions and challenges that inspire you, you devalue yourself. So I was devaluing myself. And it was not hard to see. And as I made that list, I then went, whoa, I've got nobody to look at except me. I'm doing this. I'm the one doing all this stuff. So then the next column I wrote down, how much does it produce per hour? And I considered if I was doing something produced per hour, that means I was caring enough about humanity to do something of meaningful service to somebody else where they would be willing to pay. I'm meeting some value and need in them for them to be willing to pay. Because I could be busy, but doing something that's actually meaningful and productive that actually gives you some income, I needed to know what that is. So I made a list of what it produced per hour in the next column. So I put $1,000 an hour, 0 per hour, 200 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever it is, next to every one of the things on that list, which is multiple pages. Now, the number of zeros on there was extraordinary. I was doing a whole lot of stuff that wasn't producing, but it was taking up time and costing. And I immediately decided I'm trying to charge for some of those things. I don't know, why am I not charging for that? Where did I get that? Am I injecting the values of some outer authority that I didn't even know I was doing? And I started to I raised the fee on doing those things. And I took that entire list from the thing that produced the most, which was getting out in front of a group of people and speaking and inspiring new clients, to the highest priority clinical thing. And I reprioritized it based on what produced the most down to least, and all the zeros down below. And I made a commitment to try to make sure that if I'm doing something, it's got to be a value, so I need to charge for it. And I was just devaluing myself. And when you do low priority things, you devalue yourself, and you don't value yourself to enough to charge. You diminish your own self-worth. So those 2 columns were already an eye opener. Then I went to the 3rd column. In the 3rd column, I wrote down on a 1 to 10 scale, how much meaning does it give? A 10 is absolutely, I can't wait to get up in the morning and do this. I love it. It's inspiring. I'm so grateful I get the opportunity to do it. I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. And the 1 is, I've got to do it. I'm trapped. This is the time trap that he was talking about. Now, when I went through there, I reprioritized that list according to 10 down to 1s. Now, luckily, in my case, the things that were 10s happened to be matching the things that produced the most per hour, which was speaking and training and clinically working with the highest quality clients. So I was blessed. When I got through that column, I already knew where I was headed. It was already starting to become evident where I was headed and where my focus needs to be. I went to the next column and I said, all right, if I was to hire somebody to do all of those things at my standard or greater, has to be greater than my standard or greater, my standard greater, what would it cost? Not just the salary, but the paper, the pencils, the paper clips, the computer, the depreciation schedule, the parking, insurance. I mean, I wanted a complete analysis of what is a real true cost of that individual to do that job. Training, lost opportunity cost, everything. And I made an exhaustive list and memorized that went through that whole thing and that long list of if I was to hire somebody. And then I realized that there was a whole lot of 10 and 20 and 25 and 30 and 40 and $50 jobs sitting in there. And the one that was making me the most was getting out and speaking to a group of people and engaging them into becoming patients, which was 12 to 18,000 in an hour. One big difference from doing what I was doing here at zero. So I realized that where I need to be is a man with a mission, with a message, and fulfill his vision. When I did that, I then took the spread between what it produced per hour versus what it cost per hour, and I prioritized that according to spread. So I looked at what was the thing that would allow me the greatest extraction of surplus labor value out of. I put down how much time am I actually going to do that? So if I'm allocating time, if I'm doing a job description, how much time is that really per day? And on the final column is the final prioritization with all those variables. And then when I got that done, I then divided that thing with layers in 10 different layers and put a job description for each of those layers. And the very top layer was mine. So that'll be the final thing I delegate, is a duplication of myself in a franchise or some other form. But down below, I'm getting that off my plate. So I basically hired somebody, and this took me, this was October 20th or something, 24th or something like that, second or third week in my business. 18 months later, from one assistant in a small 970 square foot office, 18 months later, I was in a 5,000 square foot office. I had 5 doctors, 12 staff members, and my net income was tenfold. And all I was doing is speaking, training doctors, and doing the very highest end corporate leading patients. And I was generating more income and doing what he said, being the visionary, strategizing, delegating, and inspiring. And I never stopped after 27. By the time I was 28, I turned 28 November that year. By the time I was 28, I never went back, and I learned for 50 years or whatever it is, 41 years now, I guess, don't do desperate things. You're not going to live an inspired life doing anything that you require motivation to do. And anytime you need extrinsic motivation to do something, you're devaluing yourself and you're end up draining your energy. So I don't waste my time on that. I delegate everything except teach, research, write, and travel. Everything's off my plate. So I have a clock changer because we change time zones on my ship. I live on a ship, in case you didn't know. I have cleaning people that come in twice a day. I've got a captain. I've got a chauffeur. I've got a pilot. I've got every single thing that I need. Cooks to take care of everything. Even my girlfriend says, "Can you have Hugh Jackman and Brad Pitt and George Clooney and Gerard Butler? Can you delegate the lovemaking to them?"
And what's your answer to that, John?
I said, "I love you so much." And she said, if I did that, would you love me any more? She says, "I would love you even more." So I don't do that. I'm joking. That was a joke. But I delegate everything. And I learned that when you get up in the morning, you want to be able to do what you love to do. you want to be able to can't wait to get up in the morning and do it. Because when you can't wait to do what you love to do, people can't wait to get what you're doing. It's a reflection. And so I let go of everything. I just let go of everything except teach, research, write, and travel.
That's brilliant. You know, it's again, it's clarity. And I think people have to come to that clarity on their own. But what I love about what you laid out is it's a way to create that clarity. And it's formulaic, and it's the way you would build an erector set when I was a kid, or Lego, or whatever it might be.
Erector set men, that's who we are.
That's who we are. I say that to some people today. They don't know what the heck an erector set is, and I've got a little baby grandson who's just getting 2, and I got to go on eBay and see where those old erector sets are. But right now he's just enjoying Play-Doh. I mean, who doesn't love Play-Doh, right? But the idea that with a plan, or at least a formula for how to go about something, it doesn't mean you're going to solve the situation the way you solved it in the same way, of course, but it gives you a starting point. I think a lot of people are lost as to things like how do I stop minoring in the major things, the most important things in my life? How do I stop majoring in the minor stuff, which is what takes up the bulk of the time? When I hear you describe that, it's been talked about also as the 80-20 rule. And I know that's been more of a focus in our business. What are, and everybody knows the 80-20 rule, but it bears repeating, and you can apply it to so many things. What are the 20% of the business that you conduct that earns 80% of your income? If you just ask and answer that one question, right? You go, oh yeah, that's when I get paid $20,000 to go and keynote a conference for an hour, that's pretty good return. Even when I was a lawyer, I don't ever remember billing that kind of money or creating that kind of a result. And there's a room full of people whose the message is impacting in a positive way, hopefully, in a very positive way in the best case. So I'm fulfilled. It's meaningful. All of that out of 1 hour's talk. Now, truly, sometimes you have to fly someplace. You're in Israel right now. I'm in California, but next week I'll be in Memphis, then I'll be in Birmingham, and then I think I'm going to be in Springfield, Missouri, on a little 3-stop, whistle tour, and then back home. But just yesterday, 2 days, 2 days ago, I was in front of a school board, California school board, and I did it all virtually. I had to talk to teachers, people that I love, people that are doing magnificent work in the world, who are underpaid, underappreciated, and exhausted. This is going to lead into the next question here. And I did that virtually. So I was able to leverage my time even further by being able to reach out, deliver this service to talk about how do you turn around your exhaustion and become more resilient, and all that kind of thing. And I did it virtually, 90 minutes over Zoom. You go, that's magnificent. That's where technology is this massive aid to us and gives us even greater options. But that's a question I have for you, John. Like, given your travel schedule, given the amount of work that you've done and number of lives you've touched, et cetera, how have you developed a greater resilience? I'd like to start out with what your definition of resilience is. I know you've got a brand new book that's coming out. In fact, as this podcast is being released, that book will be available. So in our show notes will be links to be able to go get the book. It's called The Resilient Mind. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Beautiful. So I want to talk about the resilient mind, but before we get there, I'd love to just start with how do you define it? Has resilience, the word itself, the concept, even the philosophy around it, has that been a thing that you've been aware of for quite some time? And that might lead us into the inspiration to have written the book as well. But let's start with your definition, if we could.
Well, I first got interested in resilience when I was in my 20s as a health professional, because it had a lot of application in healthcare and immune responses. So that's where I first got exposed to the idea, and that's about 45 years ago. But can I develop this? Can I make it where it's a little bit more, maybe more clear? Because if I just put a few words on it, I don't think it's going to be as appreciated as I could if I developed it a bit.
Oh, please do that. Yeah, thank you.
Let's say you're a single man or a single woman. Now today, because of spectrum, this may not be appropriately languaged, but let's say you meet somebody on the street or at a restaurant or at a social event that you find and you find you're fond of, you're infatuated with. And when you first meet them, you get the dopamine rush and the enkephalon rush, and you get oxytocin and vasopressin and serotonin, and you get a little bit of high, and you get excited meeting this person that you're attracted to. But while you're in that state, you're conscious of the positives, but you're blind to the downsides. Now, if you start dating them for days, weeks, months, or years, some of the downsides and peccadillos surface. But you don't see them initially because you're blinded. You're a little ignorant. You have an unconsciousness of some of the behaviors because of the subjective bias that you've interpreted your initial reality to. So the more infatuated you are, the more you're frightened of losing them. So anything you're philic towards, you're phobic if you were to lose it. And so the more positive you're seeing it, the more fear of the loss. Now, if you meet somebody that you meet and you are resentful to them, and you're conscious of the downsides and unconscious of the upsides, now you're going to have not an impulse towards them, but you're going to have an instinct to avoid them. These are both amygdala responses. They're both subjective biases in the interpretation of them, because if you really got to know them, you'll find out they've got positives and negative sides. Just like if you found the person you're infatuated with, they've got downsides that you're going to eventually discover. But when you're resenting them, because of that, you have a fantasy of escaping them, and you have a phobia of being around them. So your resilience is lessened the more polarized your perception. So the more you're infatuated, the more you fear its loss. The more you're resentful, the more you fear its gain. And the more fear you have, the less resilience and adaptability you have, because you're rigidly stuck in your interpretation of the reality of these people. Now, after a period of time, you discover the downsides over time. You find out the person you're infatuated with has a few things you have to deal with. Anybody who's been married for a period of time knows that there's things you eventually like and dislike. You don't find all positives. And then the things you think are terrible, a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years later, you eventually discover the wisdom of the ages with the aging process, but find some terrific coming out of that terrible. I almost died and I found my mission. So these challenging events become the catalyst for incredible opportunities. So you eventually find it. It's called desensitization on the terribles, and it's called habituation on the other ones. And it's trying to neutralize your brain back into a balance for a purpose of homeostasis for the electronic chemistry in the brain. Now, the forebrain automatically tries to neutralize the amygdala's subjective bias and automatically tries to neutralize it back into a homeostatic balance where you see both sides simultaneously. Wilhelm Wundt, about 1896, wrote a book on simultaneous contrast. And then when the individual sees both sides simultaneous, they're mindful. They're not judging. They're not highly polarized, infatuated, not highly resentful. Anything you infatuate occupies space and time in your mind and runs you. Anything you resent occupies space and time in your mind and runs you. Makes it difficult to sleep. You got all this noise in the brain. But the second you bring it back into homeostasis, into balance, see both sides, which is what the forebrain, the medial prefrontal cortex, the executive center, calms down the amygdala with glutamate and GABA transmitters. It calms down those impulses and instincts and stabilizes it. And the moment you have a perfectly neutral mind and you see both sides simultaneously, you have no fear of loss or no fear of gain, and you now have maximum resilience and adaptability. So resilience and adaptability comes from an objective state where you're not subjectively biased in your interpretation of reality and fearing the loss of things that you seek or fearing the gain of the things that you avoid. So resilience and adaptability is the maximum state of ability to respond to the environment without overreacting. And this is what our executive center is designed to do. When we live by the highest priority, our blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain, activates the medial prefrontal cortex, activates this executive center. It literally sends nerve fibers down into the amygdala, calms the impulses and instincts down, neutralizes through habituation and desensitization these misperceptions that we've stored there, that we've judged there and stored in our subconscious mind, and liberate us from that and allow us to have a more objective mind where we love people for both sides, which is what every human being wants to be. Love for both sides of themselves, not one side. And in that moment, we have maximum resilience and adaptability. And we are willing to pursue the challenges that inspire us instead of try to avoid the challenges that don't. And that's where creativity and genius and innovation and original thinking spontaneously emerge out of this forebrain when you're actually living authentically. See, when you're infatuous with somebody, you minimize yourself, and that's inauthentic. When you resent somebody, you exaggerate yourself, and that's inauthentic. It's only when you love somebody that you actually allowed yourself to be authentic. And that's the state where maximum resilience, adaptability, autonomic regulation, heart rate variability maximizes. You have more youthfulness. You're not sitting there aggravating your cardiovascular system. I mean, I could go on and on and on the significance of living by priority.
What you're doing is, and I want to add a plus this in the sense that I want to use different language for folks as well. So this is a holistic concept. That's one of the most important things as I'm deliver my keynote presentations are often about resilience or about work life. People say balance. I prefer to use the term harmony, and it's nice.
Yeah.
Some things we could use to distinguish those, but that resilience is not purely one thing. It's, first of all, we all define it differently. That's why I asked for your definition, but it's mental, it's emotional, it's physical, of course, and it's also spiritual. And that's what I'm hearing you say, because this concept of how do we get to equilibrium? How do we find that we can be neutral? What a fascinating concept. If you just ask yourself in a moment or set out the intention throughout the day to simply be neutral about things. There's a lot of things that trigger us. There's a lot of things that put us that get us to a state of anger. And I want to put that aside and come back to that in just a second. But ultimately, if we can pause, ask, choose, the book I wrote earlier the year, Change Proof, lays out this philosophy of pause, ask, choose, that if you could simply do that pause concept is phenomenally powerful. And that is to pause, take a breath, pause, take a beat, just stop where you are for 1 second and do what you just described, John, that to get to neutral, as in, this is not right, this is not wrong, this is not good, this is not bad, this is not true, this is not false, just for a second. What does that do? How does that restore? What's the restorative quality of that one beat that you take?
Phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
It really is almost its own miracle. I'm getting just a little chills because that's a truth, like a capital T truth. Call bullshit on it if what I'm saying doesn't ring true for you as well.
No, it's spot on. When you are infatuated with somebody, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which tends to activate in the brain, more delta waves, almost as arresting waves. When you are resentful to something, it activates the sympathetic, and you get beta waves.
As in you're in fight or flight in that moment, the cortisol and the adrenaline. And
rest and digest, fight or flight. When those are perfectly balanced at 8 cycles per second, 7.8 to 8 cycles per second, you get an alpha theta state. If you get it just right and you have a perfect balance and you're not exaggerating with your narcissistic pride, looking down on people you resent, you're not minimizing yourself altruistically with your shame, you're actually just centered. You get an 8 cycle per second alpha theta state, which bursts a gamma synchronicity in the brain and synchronizes the brain and gives you a tear of inspiration, the little goosebumps. It's a state of authenticity, and you get tears of inspiration, which is a confirmation of authenticity and maximum resilience. And what's interesting is the second that occurs, the hypothalamus gets activated, it neutralizes the autonomics in perfect balance, and the intracardiac network in the heart literally calm the heart down, synchronizes the heart. The bradycardia tachycardia effect of parasympathetic or sympathetic is perfectly balanced. The sinoatrial node fires, a perfect rhythm occurs. Your heart feels like it's opening, and you're now getting rewarded for being authentic and loving another individual and not judging somebody. Maximum resilience, maximum originality, maximum potential is born in that way. And what you just said, if somebody's under an emotion, if they stop and pause for a second and get their executive center to think before they react, they wake up that center. So you have that's approach to do it. That's just as valid and very quick. If they can just stop for a second and not let the emotional amygdala feel before it thinks, and allow it to think before it feels for just a second, you maximize resilience.
Yes. To me, uncertainty is the new certainty. The world we're living in right now is tremendous unknowns. It's creating a great deal of that response that you described, where we're in one state of alertness or beyond alertness and fear after another, and it's exhausting. So my work, and where our work dovetails, and I wanted to use this as a way to leg into talking about the book, is that people in the workplace, when I'm being brought in, somebody's saying, our people are tired, our people are exhausted, our people are anxious, our people are, depleted, or they don't typically use that word, but that's the word that we use for it, that in that depleted state, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, there's no way that we can be all that we're capable of being, whatever that might be. And that's all that an employer ever wants, paying for somebody to come and show up and be the best they can be. And the depletion is really the thing that is squarely in focus right now for organizations. I think it's a really good thing that they're so focused on what well-being in the workplace might, in fact, turn into or be, other than foosball machines and nap pods or whatever. So I want to get a sense from you of, first of all, what is the resilient mind, and what are I'd like to get more on what the origin of the book is, but also what's the dividend? What's the ROI for people, not just in reading the book, but in understanding the way that our minds can renew and regenerate, and I would say, using biblical verse, right? That the renewing of the mind is a really transformational thing, spiritually and non-spiritually, of course.
Authenticity is spirituality. That's the bottom line. Equanimity is spirituality. Homeostasis is the expression of the spiritual through the material.
And again, to be clear, we're not saying religious, right? Even though
no, spirituality is an inspiration. Where you may be climbing a mountain, and that's inspirational. It may not be religious, but it could be spiritual.
Right.
Whatever inspires you spontaneously, that you act without having any extrinsic motivation, is a path of inspiration for you. Mine is teaching. I mean, I do it 50 years. I've been doing it every single day, 7 days a week. I mean, I love it. So I don't think about it. I don't need motivation to do what I do.
No.
When a person goes to work, they don't go
and you
to
have
work
the energy and you have the energy to do it. The source.
Yeah, but the energy is infinite once you recognize the source. That's the thing.
Right. It's renewing itself without a willpower, let's say. You don't have to will yourself to do it.
No, anytime you're trying to live in other people's values or trying to get other people to live in your values, you're going to drain your energy. And the draining of the energy is not a mistake, not a weakness. It's a feedback from you to let you know you're not loving yourself and not loving others. You're trying to live in the shadows of others, or trying to get others to live in the shadows of you. Neither one of those are authenticity. We have control over our perceptions, decisions, and actions in life. That's it. So either prioritize your actions and take command of your actions and delegate lower priority things and get on with your life of an inspiration. Or if you haven't got somebody to delegate it, take the job duties that you have or daily duties you have and find out by asking this question: how specifically is doing this action temporarily until I can delegate it helping me fulfill what's most meaningful, most inspiring, most fulfilling, most authentic for me? And answer that question. Don't say, I don't know, I can't find it. Be accountable. Answer that question and neuroplastically remodel the brain so that action is now on the way, not in the way. So you're living a life of inspiration and mastery, not a victim of history. And if you do, you won't be blaming the job, because it's anytime you have a false attribution bias and you blame things on the outside and look for solutions on the outside of your own mind, you don't have a resilient mind. You have a delusion. So you have to be accountable for your own perception, decisions, and actions in life, and prioritizing your actions and prioritizing your perceptions, where no matter what happens in your life, how is it helping me fulfill my mission? That's one of the greatest questions any human being can ask, because then no matter what happens, it's on the way. Thank you. And it's helping you do it. And you're not going to be drained when you're doing that. You're not going to be tired. I don't get tired or drained. I mean, I have to sometimes delegate sleep to other people and say, they take care of that for me. Because when you're doing something you're absolutely inspired to do and you feel it's your calling, you don't even notice time. You're not living in the existential world of judgment. You're living in the essential state of being. And that is a timeless mind, ageless body state that Deepak talked about.
Yes. I want to talk about the renewing of the mind. So the concept being, and again, this is drawn out of scripture, and like so many things in the Bible, there's just so many applications to it that are not, again, necessarily tied to a religious dogma or context, but rather just what is commonsensical. What can we actually use as the wisdom of these words, that we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. You wrote a book, have written a book called The Resilient Mind. How important is the practice, and what does it look like to renew our minds or to create resilience mentally as to these other things? Because people who are depleted, here's an example. Last year, we're coming up on the Oscars, and last year, famously at the Oscars, an event happened, and it's been talked about. I was somehow tapped to answer a question about that event for Psychology Today a couple of weeks after that occurred. We all know what it was. And my theory then, and still is today, that event occurred, that Will Smith got up out of his seat, got up on stage and smacked a friend of his, actually, in front of the entire world, and just did some pretty serious damage to his career, maybe irreparable. Who knows? We'll see. I don't think so. But that occurred because he was depleted, not because he woke up that morning and said, I'm going to sabotage myself and my career and my family and all these things. Not because he's a person who does that on a daily basis. This is not an abusive person. He doesn't need anger management. I see him as somebody who was exhausted. And in that moment, in a state of exhaustion, he did like any of us could have done, or done worse, being in his shoes. He snapped. So his mind was not resilient in that moment. He didn't do what he could have done to stop that behavior from just creating the damage that it created. So can we use that as an example? Can we talk about that in some way, and talk about how do people create a more resilient mind in a world where they're inundated every single day with more and more? And God knows how much was on his plate, or is on any celebrity's plate, or anybody who's constantly on all the time. And then how about for just a person who's taking care of being a parent, or taking care of an elderly parent, and has a job and a boss and demands that are constant, on the weekends, and there's no weekends anymore. In that world we're living in, John, where it's just coming at us so rapid fire, how do we create a more resilient mind? I would love to spend some time there.
Well, that exercise I gave earlier would be one, because stop and look at what you're doing. And by the way, none of it has to be. First, people want to say, I have to do this, I got to do this, no, you don't. You've made a choice. You're subordinating to somebody's expectation. You're not willing to plan out an alternative pathway. And until you have an alternative pathway that you feel is more viable than what you're doing, you're going to continue doing what you're doing. But it's not because of some outside source. As long as you blame things on the outside, you gave your power away. The first thing you want to do is look inside, and what are you doing to put yourself in this position? Are you not prioritizing? Are you not delegating? Are you not planning how you're going to create your own business, to make your own decisions? Are you afraid to go and tell the people that if I go to the boss and say, if I hire somebody here to do these things and get them off my plate, I can produce more for the company? There's no such thing as a person who's trapped except in their own mind. That's the first thing, because until they get that, they're going to keep blaming things, and blames don't get you anywhere. Taking accountability for your own reality is the first step. Then
first, take responsibility for the reality that you've created.
Yeah, take responsibility for your reality. I could have easily run this story and been a victim of my history. If I'm doing all this, I got to do all this, I got to do all that. But no, I went to a bookstore and I got a book, and I changed my reality. And I basically started doing different things, and my life changed. So it had nothing to do with the world outside me. It had everything to me with my decision to how I'm going to do it. Am I going to get new education? Am I going to get mentorship? Am I going to learn a new strategy? What am I going to do to be different? Because talking about and bitching about how it is doesn't get you to make any transformation. So stop the bitching. You know, unless you change bitching into beautiful, inspired teacher of conscious humanity, inspiring neurological. If you turn it into an acronym, then now it's a sacred pathway.
I mean,
but
if
the
you
point
tell
is,
people to leave their, if you say you're not allowed to complain for a day, I think we'd have bigger problems if you just said to people, you're not allowed.
no, but you know what? I have no problem telling people, stop the bitching. You're in here. Every decision you make is based on what you believe at that moment will give you the greatest advantage or disadvantage. You wouldn't be stuck there. You're believing that right now that job is more secure than you coming up with an alternative. Right now, you're afraid that if all of a sudden you don't make this income or whatever, that your wife's going to leave you or something. These are all your stuff.
Yeah,
it's not the external circumstances.
It's a status quo bias, right? It's a status quo bias. People, it's the
exactly comfort. So I hold people accountable, because until they do, they're going to just come run a story and they say, well, this job's killing me. Well, then, you know, either crap or get off the pot.
So step one is let's be aware, for starters, that this is of my own making. Yep.
This is your own creation. Now, because I've had people who said, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I sat down and negotiated and figured out alternative, you know, Counselor, you've done it 1,000 times. And all of a sudden they go, whoa, now I know what I can do. I know what to do to solve that. Well,
I heard this description of that one time, John. You probably have heard this maybe. That you look at a child, and I got children now, little ones around me quite frequently, and they can't tie their shoe. You know, it's for the life of them. There's just no, they watch, they see, whatever. They can't tie a shoe. You know, you're 2 years old, you can't tie your own shoe. And an adult sits down, ties their shoe. It's like nothing for them. Of course, we know that in a year's time, they'll be tying their shoes, and they'll look at their little brother or sister who can't tie their shoe and think, my God, what's wrong with you? You can't tie your shoe. But that's all it is. I mean, just because you can't do something doesn't mean it can't be done. Just means you don't know how to do it.
So that means, so is it time for getting a mentor to give you some new insights on how to break through your box? Is it time to go out and get a book and learn how to read and stand on the shoulders of giants and expand your awareness? But don't bitch. You're not going to go anywhere.
Don't bitch.
Don't bitch. Stop the bitching and start enriching.
Hashtag.
Basic law there.
Don't bitch.
Hashtag.
Yeah.
Don't bitch. You know, because I didn't get where I am by bitching. I got there by enriching and learning and trying new things out. I mean,
so again, that's part of the resilient mind, right?
That's it. Because people want to run their story, and instead of running your story, make history. That's why I say make a history instead of run the old story. Because blaming does not do. Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, said when people start on their journey, they blame others. When they go a little further on their journey, they blame themselves. There's nothing to blame. Everything was on the way.
That's back to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
You talked about that neutrality.
My circumstance right now, how is it helping me get where I want to go? Now, if you haven't decided where you want to go, well, then you're going to be going where everybody else goes. You know, if you don't decide, and if you don't empower your mind, you're going to be told what to think. If you don't empower your business, you're going to be told what to do. If you don't empower yourself financially, you're going to be told what you're worth. If you don't empower yourself relationally, you'll be doing honeydew crap around the house. You don't empower yourself socially, be getting misinformation campaigns. You don't empower yourself physically, you'll be told what drugs to take and organs to remove. You don't empower yourself spiritually, you'll be told some dogma from the centuries ago. Wake up, empower your life, and give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and do something extraordinary, not ordinary. And just know that if you're going to fit in with everybody else, you're going to be stuck. You got to stand on the shoulders of giants and be willing to walk a new path. Be an unborrowed visionary if you want to do something.
Isn't that where our freedom lies anyway? I mean,
that's where resilience is. Same thing.
I love that, John. So we become aware, we take responsibility, we understand that our freedom is actually is in having this awareness, we gain a freedom we didn't have before. What are some of the things that you do, maybe even on a ritual basis, to create a more resilient mind? What does that look like for you?
I say no to everything that requires external motivation to me, and I say yes to anything that inspires me. I fill my day with inspiration, not desperation. That's that simple. It's not, people go, well, well, that's okay because you're financially independent and all that. They come up with that excuse. I said, listen, I didn't become financially independent until I started doing that.
Yeah.
That's what got me there.
It is a bit of the chicken and the egg, right? Because
people think that when I'm successful, then I'll do those things. No, do those things and you end up having the achievements that you want.
You inspired me. So while you were sharing before, I was taking that in and integrating it, and what came through for me was that people in the world that we're living in right now, it would be wise to do less. I know that's going to sound weird, maybe, I don't know, controversial even, given that there's just seems to be more and more on our plates all the time. But to do less so that we can be more obsessed with the quality of what we do. And
that's it.
And add to that we have to work in a natural way. And I think this is what you're showing right now. Your model is you're on a boat, you're on your own ship, because that enables you to travel as the way you do, impact the lives that you're able to, and still be in equilibrium, not be. And I say this because I've seen it in myself, that even in the midst of one of my inspired trips, if I'm in the airport and they've canceled the flight, or the equipment is broken, or the pilots have timed out, or the flight attendants, there's any number of reasons. We traveled enough miles to know why you don't get to where you're intended to go on time, and that kind of thing. I learned long ago, I don't check a bag. So now I have to worry about the baggage. They lost my luggage thing. That's a thing you can control. You just don't need it, right? Like but the rest of it can, even in the midst of all that, I can find myself getting angry. And I mean, like the sort of the rage that's still, it's there underneath the surface. And then I got to do my own work to go, why is that triggering you to the point where you feel enraged? Because, so
you don't have your contingency plans in place.
Well, we do. I do. I won't get into that. So I'm always able to pivot.
If you got a private jet waiting for you, it doesn't bother you. So you just go, okay, go to private jet.
It's true. But this idea of you have to work in a way that is in harmony. And I think if we just looked at those three things, do less, work in a way that is harmonious, as in, like that there's an element of, I love to work at night. My dad was a writer. I've become a writer, and working at night is the thing that I'm used to doing. But I also need my sleep. So I've had to, the tension between those two things I've had to resolve. But to do that and to in doing less, be able to focus more on the quality of your work. It just goes back to what you said at the beginning as well, right? That 80-20 principle. Like, spend your time on the things that produce the greatest return on that time and on that love, on that effort, on that energy. And the stuff that doesn't produce that return, like complaining, like, I don't know what the ROI is for bitching. I don't think there's any, right?
No.
To waste.
I learned a long time ago, because I've flown 20 million miles, over 20 million miles.
Oh my God.
And I got George Clooney, I think he did 10, he got a watch or whatever. I've done 20. So wow. What's interesting is I had been stuck many times. And, I had those rages too. I said, I'm going to find out a concierge service that solves this. And I'm going to find a private jet service that solves this. And that way I'm there, and I'm not going to do it. I'll have plan B ready. And all of a sudden I go, okay, let me have your name. Let me find out. If you can't serve me, let's go to plan B, plan C, let's have them. And if I give myself permission to do those, then all of a sudden I go, okay, this doesn't have to be running my life. So I just kept asking myself, how do I transcend anything that normally pushes my buttons, that distracts me from the external world?
What a great question. Yeah, I want to make that a call to action for folks that are, don't do this while you're driving, of course, but at some point, just want you to write that question down. And what are the things that trigger you? What are, just to write them down. I mean, like after the fact, going back to the Will Smith thing, what triggers Will, we know, is, don't, if you are offensive, you say something offensive to someone he loves, like his wife. I think, in the, the aftermath of that, we got to find out that his mom had some really hard times, and he was a young child and couldn't defend her. And so here's a guy who's always felt this responsibility to take care of and protect the important people in his life, like his mother, like his wife, and in that moment, he was just, that was his default mode, to go into that state of protection.
But sometimes we think these are mistakes. They're not mistakes. Maybe that's exactly what he needed to humble himself and to make sure that he's got even greater discipline in the future, and he can then be an inspiration to other people. So that's not, I don't ever find the moral hypocrisies that trap people in polarities of one-sided seeking undermine and block resilience.
Yes.
I learned a long time. When I was 30 years old or so, I went to the Oxford English Dictionary, the largest dictionary I could, the finest print I could. And I went through every one of the words in the dictionary, and I found every one of the human behavioral traits, 4,628 traits I found. And then I went in there and I said, who do I know that's got the most extreme behavior like that? And then I went into myself and I said, John, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, and inaction, until you can identify enough moments until you're certain you do it as much as whatever you see in them, because the seer, the seeing, and the seen is the same. And whatever you judge on the outside is nothing but a part of you haven't loved on the inside. And they're giving you an opportunity to love it. This is an opportunity, man. So I went and I found every one of them in me. I'm nice, mean, kind, cruel, pod, negative, giving, taking, generous, stingy, honest, dishonest. I had all of them. And you know what? I have no desire to get rid of any part of myself if I'm going to love myself.
Yeah.
All of it is worth loving.
All of it.
But moral hypocrisies imposed by politics and religion, sometimes they impose onto there a mechanism to get people to feel guilty, so they're easily controlled by the organizations that are promoting it. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in human behavior as it is at its finest, and that's embracing all parts of yourself. How are you going to love yourself if you're trying to get rid of half of your life? How are you going to love the world if you're trying to get rid of half of it? How are you going to love the people around you if you're trying to get rid of half of them? All of it's worth loving.
And it all comes out of the same, the same origin, which is your own concept of yourself and the shame that you have, or whatever it is that you are feeling, isn't complete. There's that old line in the Jerry Maguire movie that everybody loves, great Hollywood, of course. I think Tom Cruise says to Renee Zellweger, you complete me. And it's like, talk about the bullshit line of all time. Nobody completes anybody. That is our work. And by the way, we're not incomplete in the moment to start with. So it's one of those great paradoxes, right? Again.
Nothing's missing. I was in Nepal and I met with a Bampa Lama there. We had a nice conversation, and we both had a discussion about nothing missing, all present. It's all present. The master lives in a world of transformation. The masters live in the illusions of gain and loss. Don't be attached to form, or you'll perceive a loss or gain.
Yeah.
Transform and see the movement and change of forms at all times. Nothing's missing in you. I learned that when I was 14, and I confirmed that many times over. So I realized that when you finally realize that there's no way you can have fulfillment if you're thinking things are missing.
This all comes back to the through line, I believe, of our conversation today and of your book, which is, it's about right thinking. And what does it mean?
Wisdom.
We could spend,
wisdom,
right, months, years thinking about and figuring out what right thinking looks like. But you've already shared so much of that with us today. I not only want to recommend that people read The Resilient Mind, I want to mention two other books too, just based on what you said a moment ago. One is called The Presence Process, that a lot of people haven't heard of, Michael Brown's wonderful South African author. And the other one is a book that's going to have a strange title relative to this, but it's totally on point, which is called Healing Back Pain, Dr. John Sarno, his work on the mind-body connection, because so much of this is processing our own states as they're happening. The more present we are, the more aware we are. Hey, I'm triggered right now. My rage is being triggered. My shame is being triggered, whatever, my loneliness, my rejection, my insecurity. But if you're aware in the moment, then you have choices. But when the default is to simply react, and I think back to what we were saying earlier, that's what we saw on display with somebody that just reacted, but wasn't able in that moment to process that very conflicting emotion. And so what you've been saying all the time we've been together, I think, is that our mind is more resilient when we're actually able to be aware of that. And those books, in addition to yours, I think help with that processing stuff. How do we process so that we can, what if it's to release is the next thing, or it's to act, or whatever it might be that makes sense. But when it isn't preceded by a process of some kind of an awareness, a presence, a love, what are we left with? Well, we're left with being barbarians on some level, which we all know how to be. Everybody knows how to instinctually hurt before being hurt, or defend, or any number of other things that is creating a very difficult world we live in many ways today. John, I want to give you the more than just the last word. I would love if you could leave our folks with something. And again, we opened up a few loops here today. But if you were going to give that sort of that person who's listening to this, who is just feeling frayed somehow, exhausted, and not, not terribly inspired, but wants to be. What do you say to that person to just get even if it's the first step on the path? What might that look like coming from your perspective?
No matter what happens in your life, there's an upside to it too. So take the time to ask whatever you think is challenging you. Where's the other side of it? What's the upside to it? How's it helping me fulfill what is my mission? The one question that I think is most liberating is, how did, no matter what happened to me today, whether supportive or challenge, kind or cruel, nice and mean, positive and negative, supportive, whatever it is, no matter what happened to me in my perceptions, how did it help me move one step closer to fulfill what's in my heart? If you answer that question and quit coming up with bullshit reasons why you can't, but just answer that question and dig deeper, you will start training your mind to see, no matter what happens on the way, not in the way, you'll be a master of your destiny, not a victim of your history. And that is more resilient than sitting there running your story.
I just want to say thank you. And I know this is, so just for folks' clarity here, it is almost 10 o'clock, or it's just gone past 10 p.m. where Dr. Demartini is at present. So he is literally embodying everything we've talked about, to have the energy, to have the clarity, everything at that hour. To me, is not because you are somehow, you put your underwear on differently than the rest of us. I imagine you do it one leg at a time. I imagine.
I hired somebody to do that.
Exactly. But your resilience it's I like to think of it like a bank account, in that sense that it's constantly you're making more deposits than you are withdrawals, so you have a surplus, and that's why you're able to serve.
Why not?
Yeah.
Look, I believe we live in a magnificent universe. If we sit there and watch the media out there, which is a sensationalism trying to distract yourself from your mission, you might not recognize the magnificence. But the magnificence is every challenge we face is an opportunity to serve more people. There's a service out there we can provide. And so I see that the challenges in life are the opportunities in life. And the greater the challenges you pursue that inspire you, the greater the creativity, innovation, and the greater the outcome you're going to have in your life, the greater the life you're going to have.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know our people appreciate it. So everybody, we'd love it, of course, if you know someone that would really thrive on hearing bit of what was said today, or maybe all of it, please share this episode with those folks that you know are potentially would just benefit. Maybe that is somebody in your family, or it's a colleague, somebody that's working close to you, etc. Also, we thrive on your feedback. So, and this, by the way, is not this is not, we don't delegate this piece of it. I enjoy doing this. So when you comment, it's not a member of my team or a bot that will respond. So if you go to adammarkel.com/podcast, leave a comment there. I will be the one that responds to it. We appreciate it. And also, and I know this is self-serving, I don't quite get how the algorithm does it, but when people rate our podcast a 5-star or some other thing, more people have access to it, because it gets put in front of more eyeballs. It's just that simple. So you help us out when you do that. I don't mind asking for that help. And I certainly appreciate the fact that you go to the trouble of doing it. Dr. John Demartini, thank you so much for taking the time, especially where you are and where it is in the midst of your day, your evening now, for being with us today and sharing your wisdom. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody. Ciao for now. We'll see you again soon. I so enjoyed my conversation today. I hope you really did as well. Dr. John Demartini is everything he's cracked up to be. He is an expert in so many subtle arts. The wisdom that he shares, both in life terms, in terms of how we behave and why we behave the way we do, as well as how it translates into the context that we find ourselves in so frequently, which is in our work pursuits, in our career pursuits, in our other passions. I just so enjoyed his perspective, and I'm sure that you did as well. A couple of recaps here. We talked about how it is that we can be transformed by the renewing of our mind and what it looks like to renew our minds. We talked about homeostasis and equilibrium in the context of our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual resilience, and how we're living at the present in a culture and an age of exhaustion, and how that exhaustion turns us into sort of, complaint machines. Bitching is the word that John used. And we talked about how it is that we can actually take greater control. In fact, he gave us the absolute number one tool. And I agree with this. I don't think there's anything that trumps this particular skill. If you master this skill, if you get this skill, if you do this one thing, believe it or not, this one domino will be the start of a cascade of dominoes that will change your life forever for the better. Most importantly, how it is that we can focus on the most important things in our life, in our careers, in our business pursuits, is fundamentally paramount to how it is that we succeed. If we can't master this one particular task, if we can't get at how it is that we produce all of our results in life, I think we're at least temporarily speaking doomed to wander, not maybe aimlessly, but more confused than we need to be. And when we're struggling to figure these kinds of things out, ultimately that struggle creates an exhaustion, creates a greater depletion in our brains and in all of our faculties, but in particular with our mind, that exhaustion or that depletion makes us much less resilient and much more susceptible to reaction, overreaction, judgment, anger, complaint, etc. Things that get us nowhere, things that absolutely get us nowhere, and even more than that, exponentially speaking, set us back, create a more difficult road ahead than needs to be. So listening to this wisdom today, I think, was really fundamental for me. It was inspiring for me. 3 things that came out of this that I also want to reiterate. These were things that were inspired by what Dr. Demartini was sharing. One, where is it that we can do less in terms of our own level of depletion and exhaustion and productivity in our work, pursuits, etc.? 3 things. Do less, but obsess about the things that we do being of the highest quality. And how do we work in a way that is more in harmony? How do we work in our zone of genius, if you will? So for some of us, that zone of genius may be in the morning. Some of us, the genius zone may happen at night. Some of us, that genius zone may occur on a boat or on the water or at 35,000 feet, or it may occur in the woods walking, or by a lake, or sitting quietly for lengths of time in stillness. Where is your zone of genius? Maybe it's working right alongside other people and really leveraging the energy of the group and the mind share of the group and even the mastermind, if you will, of that gathering. Maybe collaboratively, that's the genius zone, or that's where the collaboration for you is at its greatest. Where is it? That's one thing that you can be thinking about right now. How do I work? What is my optimal work environment ecosystem look like? How do I potentially do less, but focus and obsess even about the quality of the work that I do more? Those are questions that came to me. I'm going to noodle on those things. I hope you will as well. Again, I so enjoyed this episode. If you've enjoyed it yourself, we would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment, of course, at adammarkel.com/comments. We'd love to read and hear your feedback. And if there's a response required from it, then it's going to come from me. So you know that. We would love if you've not yet taken your own resilient leader assessment, finding out a snapshot in time right now, how resilient you actually are mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. All that you need to do to get that happening for yourself is go to resiliencerank.com, resiliencerank.com, and 3 minutes, and I kid you not 4 minutes, not 2, but 3 minutes later, maybe it could be 2. You're going to get your own score in this moment. How resilient are you? What are the things that you are doing to create resilience for yourself mentally? What are the things that you're doing to create your spiritual resilience? What are the things that are keeping you emotionally resilient? And of course, fundamentally important in our lives is our physical resilience. And that's a whole host of things. And we're going to measure that, give you that feedback right away, and then send you a list of resources that are entirely free, things that you can use, things that you can do immediately to start recapturing some of what the gap might be between your snapshot resilience score now and what is optimal. So all of that, I hope, will be helpful to you. And can't wait for you to join our community, and we can dive in even further in the future. That is the great blessing of this, is that as we share our best practices, and you get to share those best practices with the people that you lead, the people in your lives that you love, well, then the ripple effect is greater for all of us. With that, I will say ciao for now. And again, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you now have even more tools and greater insights to build resilience and become change-proof. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at adammarkel.com/podcast. For more resilience tips and strategies, including support for building change-proof teams, visit adammarkel.com/become change-proof.